Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the Indiana Hoosiers for Community Solar Coalition Community Solar 101 webinars. Thank you for everybody who's making time on a busy night, maybe peeling yourself away from what I'm sure will be another awesome Indiana Pacers victory in the NBA in-season tournament. Go Pacers. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Zach Schalk. I am the Indiana Program Director for Solar United Neighbors, and I will be getting us going this evening. Tonight, we're going to have a really participatory, informal, informational discussion of what community solar is and how we can bring it here to Indiana. In addition to hearing from me, you're going to hear from a couple other experts who are on the line as well. And we will definitely get started there in a second. But while we get going, we have some welcome poll questions that I hope everybody can answer, just to get us a better sense of where you're coming from. And I invite everybody to please pop into the chat and introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. Let us know what brings you here tonight, what you're excited about. And throughout the evening, you can use the chat to communicate with everybody who's on the line with us. Before we get going anymore, I do want to give a shout out to our friends down in Evansville who are hosting an in-person watch party. So welcome everyone who is down there. I hope Christopher is treating you to only the finest snacks. So thank you for those of you who are getting together in person as well. All right. We're going to try to stay on schedule tonight, so I'm gonna let us get going. First, just some simple Zoom housekeeping. I know I'm sure most people are familiar with Zoom by now, but this is going to be a large meeting tonight. So we are keeping everybody muted here for the first half while we're kind of focusing on presentations, and then we will have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And I'll share this when we get there as well. But if you want, you're more than welcome, invited to turn on your camera so you can see everybody else who's on the line, and everybody can see you. As I mentioned, right now, we're going to keep everybody muted except for the presenters. But as we get going into Q&A later tonight, we will give everybody the ability to unmute so you can ask questions. But there's also the chat. So you can find the chat icon and share any questions you have, comments. And we'll also be sharing links to resources in the chat throughout the evening. Finally, when we get to the Q&A section later tonight, we were going to ask everybody to use the raise hand feature of Zoom. That just helps us kind of keep track, keep things orderly. And so you can access the raise hand feature by selecting the reactions icon on the bottom of your screen and then clicking raise hand, and that'll put you in a line to ask questions when we get there later. Okay, so tonight we are here to talk about community solar in Indiana. And in particular, we're talking about the coalition that is formed, the Hoosiers for Community Solar Coalition, that is working together to advance real community solar here in Indiana to benefit all Hoosiers. And we'll be talking more about that as the evening goes on. But just a little bit about Hoosiers for Community Solar. First, you can see all of the wonderful coalition members who are part of our group on the slide here. This picture is from the event when we launched the coalition this spring at the Indiana State House. But the Hoosiers for Community Solar Coalition is a group of organizations around the state that are working to enable independent community solar as a tool to make the benefits of renewable energy accessible to all Hoosiers. It's clear that local clean energy is our future, but we need to make sure that that future is one that works for everyone, not just big companies and utilities. And so our shared vision is a statewide community solar policy that supports community and other independent ownership of community solar, tangible savings for subscribers, competitive and transparent markets for community solar development, and equitable access to the benefits of community solar for all Hoosiers. And we'll be digging more into each of those tonight as we go along. And once again, just as another plug, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. We'll be answering questions in the chat, but also we'll be holding some questions for the Q&A later, in addition to allowing people who want to speak to raise their hand and unmute. So what are we going to be covering tonight? We're going to be talking first about the basics of community solar. You'll be hearing from me about that. Then I will turn it over to Dr. Junius B. Pressey, who's a board member with the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, to talk about why community solar matters for underserved communities. Then you'll get to hear from Kira Dalt with Faith in Place, who is going to be talking about her experience as a community solar owner or community solar subscriber, I should say, in Illinois, just to give you a sense of what that's like from a customer's perspective. Then we'll kind of bring it back together to talk about what you can do as solar supporters and advocates around the state to bring real community solar here in Indiana. And then we'll move on to questions and answers so we can hear what you all are interested in and hearing more about and what we can do to help facilitate some positive learning tonight. All right, so let's get going with community solar basics. So first of all, I want to make sure that everybody's familiar with where community solar fits into the equation of the renewable energy transition that is sweeping the country and is catching us here in Indiana as well. So there's a bunch of different kinds of solar, but the kind of big buckets are either the large utility scale solar, which Indiana is actually a national leader in the amount of utility scale solar that's being developed. These are very large projects ranging as you see here, anywhere between 100 acres to much larger than that, thousands of acres. And that solar energy is plugged into the transmission part of our energy system. So that's kind of the bulk purchase system. It's not the lines that connect to your home. Then there's also a small scale, often called rooftop solar, or other kinds of small behind the meter ground mount solar. That's something that those of you who are familiar with Solar United Neighbors that you are used to hearing about from us. That's where we really specialize, and that's the Hoosiers around the state who are installing solar on their roofs or in their backyard to cover some of their own consumption, though they do share some of that electricity with their neighbors. But then community solar is kind of in the middle. Community solar is usually somewhere bigger than a rooftop solar array, but much smaller than a utility scale solar system, and it's also connected to the distribution grid. That means it's energy that flows into the local electric system, not just the big transmission lines that you see when you're driving down the interstate. So that's what situates community solar in the scheme of the different types of solar energy that you might be familiar with. So what is community solar? Simply put, community solar enables subscribers to receive credits for part of their energy that's put out by a local solar panel array. That larger than your rooftop solar array that is installed on the distribution system. Community solar is the way to access credits and from the energy that's produced there. So what does that look like in practice? So a nice way to think about it is you have these solar panels that are in the middle here of this graphic here. And instead of all that energy flowing just to one customer, community solar is a tool that a bunch of customers can use, community members can join together and can all benefit from that solar array. So you might hear it called shared solar. There are a lot of different names for it, but the simple idea is here, there's solar arrays that are producing energy, and maybe it's a school, maybe it's a business, maybe it's a family. Everybody's getting some of the credits from the energy that those solar panels produce. And just to put it a different way, from the subscriber's perspective, basically what you want to see is a very simple process where you can actually subscribe to a portion of the energy output that's produced by solar panels on the distribution grid. That the energy that's produced by those panels isn't going to physically flow to your house. Instead, it's going to flow to the distribution electric grid, and the energy, the utility that serves you will buy that energy. But then you'll get credits on your bill from the utility based on the value of the solar energy that your part of the subscription produced that month. And that is kind of the circular process here that you'll see on this slide. So why do people choose community solar? So there are a number of reasons why people are interested in community solar, and you'll definitely hear some more perspectives about that tonight. But in short, the biggest reason is that people want to access local solar, be part of the clean energy transition, but for whatever reason, they can't install rooftop solar themselves. Common reasons are because they rent, or just live somewhere that physically can't host solar because of shade or the orientation of the roof, or they have other roadblocks. They can't afford it. Their homeowners association won't allow them to go solar. They don't have the physical space for the amount of solar that they want to use, especially for larger consumers. So there's a wide range of reasons that people choose to install community solar. But in addition to, the motivating factors of just wanting to see more clean energy and save a little money on your electric bill, there are a number of benefits that community solar provides for everybody, especially real independent community solar. So just to list a few, opening up Indiana for community solar will just empower more developers, communities, and individuals to be able to benefit from more homegrown Hoosier clean energy. So it's another tool for deploying the clean energy that we need faster on our local grid. It also means a more efficient electric system that will improve resilience and lower costs. It, if designed properly, will definitely create good local jobs, good paying local jobs, and opportunities for equitable economic development. It also will allow customers to benefit from competition, choice, and innovation in the energy sector that's too often moving too slow when it's controlled by the traditional monopoly utility and other incumbent actors. And then finally, it creates a more inclusive and fair energy future for everyone. Everybody can participate in a system with community solar as a part of it. And that's the future that we certainly want to build. So you've probably heard me a few times tonight say independent community solar. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight what we're talking about when we say real community solar, independent community solar, because the reality is that utilities can already pursue something akin to community solar, and often they use the branding of community solar to try to confuse customers that this isn't something you need to worry about. We got you covered. But what we mean by independent community solar is a system that empowers ordinary Hoosiers, community groups, and private developers to invest in and benefit from the clean energy future, not just those big companies, not just those monopoly utilities. So this is really about expanding access and radically changing who can participate, who can benefit from this clean energy transition that is going on. And again, you'll hear more about that from Dr. Pressey and Kira in just a moment. And I think it's really important for us here in Indiana to know that this isn't Indiana trying to, trailblaze and do something nobody else has done. This is sweeping the nation. Independent community solar is already enacted in many states, and there are other states that are in the process of working on legislation to open a real competitive independent community solar market, including our neighbors in Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I'm sure there are probably more more states that aren't captured in this graphic. So basically, this is happening. We want to make sure Indiana isn't left behind. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Apostle Dr. Junius B. Pressey, and he's going to talk about why community solar matters for underserved communities. Just a bit about Dr. Pressey first before he takes over. Dr. Pressey is a veteran of the United States Air Force, former president of the Fort Wayne NAACP chapter, and former board member of the Fort Wayne Urban League. Currently, Dr. Pressey is a board member of Changemakers Community Inc. of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and is the founder and president and CEO of Indiana Environmental Clean Energy J40 Corporation, a nonprofit community-based organization focused on sustainability, environmental, climate, and energy justice, offering education, workshops, and solutions for clean and renewable energy. And he's here tonight in his role as a member of the board of directors for the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, as well as IECEJ40 Corporation, which are both members of the Hoosiers for Community Solar Coalition. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Pressey, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you so very much, Zach, for that kind introduction. And I'd like to say good evening to everyone. I'm starting my timer now to make sure that I don't go over my time. Tonight, what we want to do is, you can show that first slide. First of all, as Zach indicated, we're in Indiana, but the conversation that we're having is a conversation about what is happening around the nation. And so what we're trying to do is to make sure, you can move to the next slide, please. Tonight, we want to talk about, Zach talked about community solar. Currently, we are involved with a grant here in Indiana where we are promoting community ownership of solar in Indiana and across in Fort Wayne and across the state. And our partners right now is People's Solar Energy Fund. We are also in collaboration with the community of color, supporting the capacity for community-owned solar, solar, and we are proud to be a member of the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition. Next slide, please. Henry David Thoreau once said this. He said, "It is not what we look at that matters, it's what do we see." We have been in a lot of conversation about community solar and solar, but the question tonight, all over this state and around the country, what are we really looking at? Because if we're just looking at solar in itself, we will be defeating our purpose of why we are moving towards more clean energy and wanting to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions throughout this nation. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we need to do is to take a look at where are we? And if we take a look at where we are in Indiana, we have to take a look at and be concerned about the emissions that are being emitted throughout our state. And EPA in 2021 indicated that Indiana is the fourth leading state in terms of emitting toxic poisons in our atmosphere, coming from about 88 different companies that's operating in our state. So we have to take a look at where this emissions is coming from. Most of it is coming from carbon dioxide, 85.9%, methane, 5.8%, nitrogen oxide, 6.4%, and fluorinated gases, 1.9%. Then we can also categorize where the emissions is coming from. Most of it is coming from electric power industry, 36.8%, industry, 26.4%, the transportation industry, 19.2%, and then it follows agriculture, 7.9%, commercial, 5.1%, and 4.6% residential. And this is just looking at Indiana. But we know nationwide, 46% of emissions in our atmosphere is coming from right where you live. The home that you're living in is emitting most of the emissions of gas in our atmosphere. Next slide, please. So when we take a look at what's all this fuss about community solar? There was a article in one of the New York newspapers that said that half of Americans cannot install solar panels. And what Zach was talking about, yes, Indiana is moving greatly in solar, but we're here tonight because in the disadvantaged communities, most of our disadvantaged residents or renters are not able to afford rooftop solar. So we are concerned, next slide, please. We are concerned about why we need to have more control in our community. As you can see from our Citizens Action Coalition, they have indicated in the area in which I live in, which is Fort Wayne, and we're under I&M electric company, and over from 19 from over the last 10 years, 48% of our electric bills is going up. It's going up and it's going up. And we need to have community solar to fight the escalating costs of utilities in the state of Indiana. And I don't know if most of you know it, but the Indianapolis Star did a report, and they showed that Indiana is the #1 leading state in the cost for utilities. And secondly, they said that Indiana is a leading state in the cost of solar per megawatts in the country. And we're trying to promote solar, but at the same time, the cost of that solar per wattage is going up. And so we're concerned that many of our residents are not able to meet their bills. Go to the next slide, please. And what we see in Indiana from the major utility companies, look at all of the number of people in our state, and especially Blacks, indigenous, and other people of color that's living in disadvantaged communities. They are being cut off. They are being disconnected. And can you imagine someone that's been working all of their lives that's now not earning an income, but they're on Social Security? We have in Indiana 2.9 million poor people in this state. And of those 2.9 poor people in the state, 29% are veterans like myself that are not able to pay their utility bills. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at Indiana. Indiana has been spotlighted. We're doing some great things in Indiana. We have 16,054 total solar installed in this state. That's 190,920 homes that is empowered with solar, but that only represents 1.7% of the solar energy in the state of Indiana. And we are projected to grow by 9,400 over the next 5 years in megawatts, which only will rank us 5th in the nation. Right now in Indiana, we have 3,946 jobs, which is ranking us at 23 of all of the states in 2022. So where are we right now? In Indiana, we have 94 solar companies that are currently operating in Indiana. 25 manufacturers, 36 installer developers, and 33 other companies that are connected, to solar in this state. Next slide, please. Next slide. So, as we begin this conversation in the next minute and 20 seconds, we have to be at the same level of understanding. There's many definitions of solar. Solar is referred to as solar power plants, solar farms, solar gardens, solar parks, solar roofless solar, shared solar, rental solar. We have to make sure that we are communicating and we can understand the language that we're using in order for the customers to understand what it means that we want community solar. And we're concerned about ownership of community solar, being able in our communities to control our own sustainability of solar. That means that we are going to be talking to investors in our community who want to invest in solar projects that will benefit our community. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what are the 3 benefits of community solar? Economic benefits, there's economic benefits, and there is community benefits and environmental benefits for this solar. And if you have any questions, we will take that up during this hour. But I just want to give you one of the reasons why in the BIPOC community or disadvantaged communities, why we need more access and more funding for community solar in our communities. And in the city of Fort Wayne, we are part of the Solar for All grant, and we hope that we will get that grant so that we can solarize both rooftop and community solar in our community, because we do not want to leave anybody behind, and especially with all of the utility companies constantly escalating and increasing, the cost of a necessity that we need in our state and in our lives. And so, thank you so much.
Great. Thank
And
you
I'll
so much,
pass it
Dr.
back over to
Pressey.
Zach.
Yes, thank you. And if folks have questions for Dr. Pressey, please put them in the chat or be prepared to ask them when we get to the Q&A. We'll definitely make sure that coalition members who are on the call, many of us you can find with our orange backgrounds on the Zoom, will be able to respond to your questions. So thank you for that presentation, Dr. Pressey. Just going to advance through a few more of these slides. And okay, now we are going to move to our next presenter, who's going to share her perspective as a community solar subscriber in Illinois. So before I hand it over, let me give a little intro to Kira Dalt. Kira serves as the Director of Communications for Faith in Place and the Faith in Place Action Fund. Her personal mission statement is to wield empathy, creativity, and collaboration to advance positive change and justice in the world, which I love, Kira. That's wonderful. Kira's passion for environmental justice stems from her passion for democracy, abolition, and racial justice. And she lives in the Hyde Park neighborhood in Chicago with her family, including her husband and 2 children. And she's here tonight to share her personal experience as a community solar subscriber in Illinois. Thanks for joining us, Kira. Take it away.
Thanks, Zach. And thanks, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I do feel this strong need to caveat, right? I live in Illinois, and I am a communications person. I am not an expert in community solar. I am, however, a community solar customer, have been for a little over a year. Of course, in Illinois, we do have community solar statewide. It was part of multiple legislative efforts in Illinois. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit and talk about my experience in signing up for it. And then I'm going to share some of the ways that community solar has actually saved money for my household and our sort of overall carbon footprint reduction, as much as that's possible to really calculate this way. So like Zach mentioned, I do live in Chicago. I live in the Hyde Park neighborhood. And my family and I live, we do own our home, but we live in a condo. So we live on the 4th floor of a 6-family building. So because of that, rooftop solar was never an option. We don't have a yard. We don't have a lot of this space that would be required to install solar on our home. We also just don't have the sort of the disposable income necessarily at this point to be able to undertake a project like that. So the other piece here is we are also, my husband and I work from home. So we are what I would call sort of relatively high consumers of electricity because we're home all day. We run electronics pretty much all day long. And so our energy consumption compared to our neighbors, my utility is ComEd. And so I often we get these bills from ComEd that says, here's how you're comparing in terms of energy efficiency to your neighbors. And we're always a little bit higher than our neighbors, in part because we are just home all the time. We are home very frequently, which means that we use more electricity than most of our neighbors do. And because we are concerned about our carbon footprint, we are concerned about the way that we are living in the world and the footprint that we're leaving, we wanted to find ways to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. So again, the option for that for us is community solar. So this gives us the opportunity to move most, and actually in our case, it's all of our electricity supply away from conventional power generation. So we actually have a contract that allows us, even on our highest consuming months, to get all of our electricity from our community solar contract. So I'm going to just tell a little bit about the process now of how we got our contract in Illinois. We have the ability to choose our community solar project that we seek a contract with. So when we decided to go the route of community solar, we did some research. I actually really relied on the Citizens Utility Board in Illinois because they have a really comprehensive list of community solar projects and the kinds of contracts that they offer consumers. Most of them come with some sort of discount, but they also have sort of term lengths in their contracts. So I actually got multiple bids when I decided to go and seek out community solar. We chose the bid based on who could get us in the fastest, because most of the structure of the contract was basically the same. We got a 15-year contract that included a 20% discount on the supply charge for those 15 years. So that means that basically, I'll show you what that means directly, but we pay the delivery charge through our utility, which is ComEd, but we pay the supply charge directly to our community solar project. The most difficult part of the whole process for me was choosing and sort of figuring that out. I think a lot of the organizations that are represented on this call and in this coalition will be a great resource when Indiana does have community solar. So that's, it's definitely going to happen. And everyone on this call will be a great resource for that. So I signed up online, completed an application for, and got these bids, and then signed the contract. And now I pay 2 bills for electricity, which is not totally ideal. It would be lovely if I could just pay 1 bill to my utility and have that distributed appropriately. But as it is, I have automatic payments set up for both my utility and my community solar. So I don't really notice, except when I first get that set up, or if I have to change my credit card number, then it gets annoying. Okay, so I will say one more piece before I sort of show all of the discounts that we get, and that is that I am also walking my parents through the same process because they also live in a multifamily home. And it is something that is fairly simple for them to be able to do. It's a way for them to cut down on some of their carbon footprint. They are very environmentally conscious as well. So, okay, Zach, would you share the slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so I don't have a great, there are some solar providers I've found who have lovely little graphics that show where their savings are. My solar provider does not do that. So I did a little math, and I looked at the last 6 months of my community solar charge. So my total savings over that 6 months, remember I have a 20% discount on my supply, was about $65. It's not, we're not huge savings, but $65 is fairly good. My highest usage month, I had a $13 discount. My lowest usage month during that time, I had a $6 discount. But my combined bill for October, which October is sort of a moderate usage month for me, was $24 for community solar. So that was my supply charge. My delivery and fees from my utility was $39 and change. And so my total bill for October came to $63.75. My total 6-month savings during this period was $65, which means that essentially community solar got me 1 month of my electrical charge here. So I got 1 month free over the course of 6 months. And the total emissions avoided, this is the number that was given to me by my community solar farm, is 6,466 kilograms of CO2. I don't have a great way to verify that, but it makes me feel much better than having all of that electricity go through the fossil fuels. So that is my experience. It's been very smooth and positive at this point. I think a lot of it is about the structure that's set up in the legislative process. So sign up for those activist alerts. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Kira, for sharing your experience. And once again, if you have any questions specifically for Kira, please share them in the chat or be prepared to ask them here shortly when we transition to the Q&A. So over the last 30 minutes or so, you've heard hopefully some helpful information about what community solar is, about why community members want community solar, and what it's like to be a community solar subscriber. But as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, we have some work to do to bring community solar, real community solar, independent community solar here to Indiana. And so this is not just a purely educational forum tonight, but we also want to make sure that we're having you all walk away with some concrete actions that you can take to bring real community solar here in Indiana. And so before we get to the Q&A, I wanted to highlight the most impactful things that you can do to help us out here. And so first and foremost, you can contact and meet with your state legislators, your Indiana senators and representatives, senator and representative. And you can do that very easily by going to Hoosiers for Community Solar's website. We have a form that you can use to send an email to your state legislators. It also has great messaging tools that you can use to call your legislator and talk about community solar and ask them to support a community solar bill, sponsor legislation, sign on as a co-sponsor, support it in caucus, and vote yes if and when there's a bill that they can vote on. So that's the first thing. Second, we have a great event that many of our coalition members are helping to put on. It's called Renewable Energy Day. This will be the 6th annual Renewable Energy Day coming up on February 13th next year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But first, I would like to make sure we can launch our poll because we want to make sure that folks on the line tonight, you're not just leaving tonight saying, well, gee, that was a great webinar. I learned a lot. We want you to try to think about what you can do to bring real community solar here in Indiana. And so we'll launch a poll where you can see some of the actions you can take that will make a concrete impact, and let us know how you can help us bring real community solar here to Indiana. So the last thing that we'll talk about before we get to the Q&A is just Renewable Energy Day. I know I just mentioned it, but I want to make that pitch one more time. This is a great way for you to join together with Hoosiers from around the state. Come with us at the State House, and yeah, speak up to advocate for real community solar here in Indiana. Meet with your legislators, meet with staff. Feel powerful that you're together with Hoosiers from around the state that want the same things that you want. So again, you can go to solarunitedneighbors.org/RED 2024. You can RSVP today. When you RSVP over the next couple months, we will be connecting you with other constituents in your district, helping you with tools and resources to set up legislator meetings, with messaging tips, and with all kinds of other great fun. We'll also have a special webinar just focused on training for Renewable Energy Day that'll be coming up in February, a week before the actual event on February 13th. So stay tuned for all of that. But once again, I hope that we can count on everybody who's on the line tonight to join us at the State House and make sure that our voices can't be ignored. Okay. And so with that, I just want to do a real quick Zoom refresher because we are going to allow folks to unmute and ask questions now. But so just to try to keep this, this is a large event. We will give people the ability to unmute, but we would ask for everybody to stay muted unless you are called upon and are asking a question. And if you would like to ask a question, please, you can type it in the chat. We'll do our best to stay on top of the chat, but you can also raise your hand and you'll get in a queue. And you can unmute yourself and can ask your question verbally. And so I will be moderating the Q&A, but we have coalition members with expertise in a whole bunch of different areas. So I'll be trying to kind of hand out the answers to everybody else, other coalition members, so you can hear other folks besides just hearing from me tonight. All right, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I would like to first, invite anybody who has questions to raise your hand and get in queue. I see Joey's hand is up. I want to ask a question that we got in the chat earlier first, just to start. And I'm going to direct this question to my colleague, Kerwin Olson from Citizens Action Coalition, who is on the call. There's a question here. Basically, I won't read the full question, but it does highlight that there was the 21st Century Energy Policy Development was a legislative task force that has been meeting over the past several years and issued their final report last year, which included a finding that said appropriate statutory authority exists for utilities to establish community solar programs. So the question from that, and this person was asking based on feedback that they got from their legislator when talking about community solar, was the task force said, there's nothing to see here. There's already statutory language that allows for utilities to establish community solar programs. So if that authority already exists, what are we asking for that's different? What is the specific ask that our advocates should be making to legislators, and why is that finding that the task force made insufficient for our goals?
Well, yeah. Thanks, Zach. Hi, everybody. Kerwin Olson with CAC. Well, to your last question, Zach, that finding was bought for, paid for, and sponsored by Indiana Electric Monopoly Utilities. No question about it. Because they're correct. The utilities can do community solar if they would like to, but they are sort of a domain and owners of their own domain. So only them under current Indiana law can do that. And the answer really is also the initial presentation that you gave, Zach, where you talked about what we are specifically seeking, and that is independent community solar, owned, operated by third parties with investments made by third parties connected at the distribution grid. So we're not talking about utility-owned community solar projects. We're talking about independently owned community solar, and better yet, even community-owned solar. So yeah, big difference there. And I also saw Joey asked a similar question in the chat about legislative hurdles, if you will, to community solar. And I can tell you that we don't need to think hard about this. It is 100% the monopoly electric utilities. The opposition to community solar in the legislative conversations I've had in recent years are reminiscent and almost identical to the conversations that I was having about net metering 15 years ago in terms of the cost shift and the subsidy, et cetera, cost to rate players. Utilities, the investor-owned utilities have, been beating that drum. If you repeat something often enough, people will believe it. And they have been repeating that in the hallways of the State House with the deep influence that they have for nearly 2 decades now. So the opposition to community solar is almost exclusively monopoly-owned, investor-owned utilities who see community solar in the same light as they view net metering, in the same light as they viewed energizing Indiana and efficiency, as a direct threat to their revenues, to their profits, and their bottom line. And they are stifling community solar at every opportunity to prevent inviting that sort of competition into Indiana's marketplace, which only serves to bring down the cost of electricity and relieve some of these rate pressures that Indiana consumers are facing. So the primary, if not only, opposition to community solar at the State House is coming from the narrative created by the investor-owned electric utilities, although there is a certain element of anti-solar in general, as we know in Indiana, with respect to communities viewing commercial scale solar as an attack on Indiana prime farmland, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some of that element in there, but the opposition to community solar, plain and simple, is the investor-owned electric utilities. I hope that answers the question, Zach.
Yes, thank you so much, Kerwin. Thanks for joining us tonight and bringing your expertise. Joey, you had your hand up, but you put it down. Do you have a separate question?
Erwin finished it. I'm good. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Joey. We got another question that I think is interesting and maybe more nuts and bolts practical. Linda Hammer is asking what happens if you need to move. So I think this was directed to Kira. So Kira, do you know how to answer that? Or I can give an answer, but you're the community solar subscriber.
Well, I can tell you all of the contracts that I got, the competing contracts that I was able to get, they all have no penalty cancellation. So if I were to move within the state, I could keep the contract. If I were to move out of the state, I would cancel the contract with no penalty.
Great. Thank you, Kira. Yeah, I think the answer is basically it would depend on what community solar looks like in Indiana, but having that kind of standard, no penalty for moving, easy to transfer if you're moving within the utility territory, like those are all core principles that we would certainly be advocating for after we're successful passing this legislation. We get to the point where we're really implementing the nuts and bolts of a community solar program.
Mm-hmm. Zach, may I add something to this conversation about the community solar and why we really need it? Olson did an excellent job of giving us a history of it. But one of the things that I look at, I spent 10 years in the civil rights arena, and one of the things that we looked to was the law. And one of the laws that opened up opportunities was the 14th Amendment, which gives everybody an equal opportunity to express their rights. And when I started looking at energy in Indiana and started looking at where could I get the best information about what's going on. And I went to a conference this past about 3 months ago to one of the regulators' Midwestern conferences, where we sit down with the utility companies that normally people like me, we don't sit at that table. And one of the things that happened is I started building relationship with some of these regulators in Indiana. And so I got a copy, and I would encourage all of you to get a copy of the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commissioner's annual report. One of the things that was in the report that's in my gall is that our legislators are not supporting community solar for us as customers, but at the same time, we have 94 municipal parks in the state of Indiana. In other words, municipalities can set up municipal parks so that they can benefit from reduced costs of their energy costs, but they are not allowing us as individuals to subscribe to their system. Now, something is wrong with that picture. Here I am, a taxpayer, and my city, Fort Wayne, have the opportunity to solarize all of their facilities and get a reduction in their costs, but we as residents and customers of the same system cannot get the same benefit. I'm sort of perplexed that as a taxpayer, you're using taxpayers' dollars to invest in your solar array, but yet we as citizens cannot even use the array that you're benefiting from. That's taxation without representation. And we got to do something about that in the state of Indiana.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Presley. And sorry, I realize now I didn't know you had your hand up because it blends into the sun in your background.
No problem.
So sorry about that. Yeah, I'll go ahead and call on Susan. Your hand's up.
Yeah, I'm thinking that that our Tipmont REMC has extended net metering, and I'm wondering if there's some way that community solar with the REMC could be a kind of wormhole into starting community solar in Indiana. And then saying, look how that's benefited these people in this rural area. Why are people in cities not able to benefit from this, and kind of use it as an object lesson about community solar?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. That's a really, really great question. I will just highlight that one of your fellow Tipmont member owners, Ben Davis, did actually come down to the State House during the Energy Task Force meeting last year that had focus on community solar and shared his perspective as a Tipmont member. I will just say what we are the legislation that we want to see would be focused on Indiana's 5 investor-owned utilities. So the REMCs like Tipmont, and also the vast majority of the municipal electric utilities are regulated differently. They have kind of a different set of rules, and they're supposed to be more democratic, oftentimes more in theory than practice, unfortunately. But Tipmont is a really interesting example of an REMC that does have a program that they market as community solar. It is a utility-owned asset, but as a co-op, the utility is owned by its members, and they do have a pretty good community solar program compared to other REMCs, as far as I'm aware, around the state. So I do think there is an opportunity for those of you who have those kind of programs to talk to legislators about why don't especially somebody who lives is a Tipmont member, lives near Duke customers, but the Duke customers can't benefit from anything similar. So I think that's a really great point. So thank you, Susan, for bringing that up. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. I think we'll have time for one more question after Jeff, potentially.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think this is all leading up to what we want to do with the legislative session. Do you have legislation, or are you aware of legislation for community solar that's being written and developed, or that do you have any bill numbers so we can follow it?
I'm going to go ahead and direct that question to Kerwin once again. Oop. Did the IEA keep Kerwin from answering? There we go. You're on mute, Kerwin.
Duh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no. Jeff, yes, we are, many of us are working hard to get a bill introduced. I don't want to get ahead of legislators before they announce their agenda, before they announce what they plan to do, but we are incredibly optimistic that we will see a bill introduced in the House. We are working very hard to make that happen, and I think that will. Questions remain about who exactly will be the co-authors on that bill, the sponsors on that bill, and we're hoping that we can get a bipartisan bill introduced. But just to be transparent, we've got a Democrat that will likely introduce a bill, but I don't want to get out ahead of anybody and name names. We still have, the issue of strong utility opposition, which translates into strong opposition from both the chairs of the Utility Committee in the Senate and the House. But we're working on it. We're expecting that we'll see a bill introduced, and no bill numbers will be assigned or made public until early January. So
Yeah.
we will have more information by the second or third week of January about any specifics around the legislation and associated bill number.
Let's go to work. Thank you.
You're on mute, Zach.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you, Kerwin, for that answer, and thanks for the question, Jeff. I'll just add to that, just to add on to the timeline that Kerwin mentioned. Once we do have that information, we will definitely be sharing it across the coalition. And we will definitely be sure. I think I saw another question from Ray in the chat asking if there was something written down about what we want to see as a coalition. I would direct you to the Hoosiers for Community Solar website, which has a lot of great information outlining the type of programs we want to see. But we will definitely be producing materials and in the lead up to Renewable Energy Day, and as soon as the legislative session is underway, kind of to equip grassroots solar advocates, lobbyists, constituents to make sure that you all have a clear picture of what the coalition is advocating for, and so that you're informed about that as well. I think we have time for one more question. Is there anybody else that has any burning questions?
Jeff had his hands up. Jeffrey?
I think
Got his.
We already took care of that.
In addition to the question, yeah, Zach, I want to shout out all our coalition partners, all the groups that kind of made this happen, who brought this event together, a team effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to all of the members of Hoosiers for Community Solar. You can go to our website and see the full coalition list. There are a bunch of great folks who are on tonight as well. So thank you to everybody who was able to join. We will be following up with everybody who RSVP'd, including links to how you can take action, a recording of this event. I think we can probably include the slides. I saw some folks asking for the slides as well. I think we can probably share those so that that's helpful. But I also just want to kind of close, in addition to the calls to action that we've already had, which is use the Hoosiers for Community Solar website to contact your legislators. Take the resources from there. Don't just stop at the one-click email. Give them a phone call. Find them in your district and meet with them and talk to them about community solar so they can't ignore us. Right? We really need to build this momentum. And at this point, we need all 150 legislators in the Indiana General Assembly to hear from their constituents. So there's nothing wrong with contacting your legislators. Even if they already support community solar, tell them thank you. And then join us at Renewable Energy Day on February 13th so we can show up at the State House and be proud. But the last thing that I want to leave you all with is, if you are part of another organization that you think would be interested in joining this coalition, the doors are open. We absolutely want to hear from you, and we're trying to build the biggest, most powerful movement that we possibly can, so that we can get done what we need to do at the State House to pass real community solar legislation in this coming General Assembly session or in the years to come. And as maybe a last bit before we close, I definitely want to give a shout out to everybody down in Evansville that made it out tonight to watch in person. So great job, everybody. I have too many things on my screen to see you. I don't know if the video's on. Oh, there's Christopher. There we go. Hey, everybody. All right. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for joining us. Down in Evansville, they're going to get busy writing, talking more about community solar and writing postcards to their legislators. So keep up the good work. Christopher, if you have anything you want to add, go for it.
Great job, y'all.
All right. Hey, thank you all so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Onward and upward. Let's go bring real community solar here to Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good evening, everybody. I'm fired up. Let's go.
Right now. Let's go.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for a good meeting. Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for joining.
Really
meeting.
informative, Dr. Presley. Really good. Did a wonderful job.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody from Midwest Building Decarbonization that showed up.
All right now.
All of our friends from Indiana. Thank you for our representative, Brian from Sun, representing Northeast Indiana.
Yeah.
And we're working together.
That's right. Indiana in the house.
All right.
God bless everybody. Merry Christmas.
All right.
Take care.
Take care, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.